I know people throw around phrases like, my life fell apart in an instant, but I mean it literally. One moment, I was a husband, a homeowner, a man with a future. The next, I was a ghost, a name erased from a life I had built with my own hands. It all started with a feeling, a gut instinct I couldn't shake. My wife, Rachel, had been acting strange for weeks. The late-night meetings, the hushed phone calls in the other room, the sudden uptick in her social life without me. But the real warning sign? She stopped looking at me like I mattered. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was an inconvenience, a footnote in whatever new chapter she was writing behind my back. So, I did what any man in my position would do. I started paying attention. I checked our shared bank accounts, withdrawals here and there, small enough not to raise alarms but frequent enough to mean something. I tracked her location one night when she said she was out with friends. She wasn't. She was parked outside some high-rise apartment complex across town. And then, the moment of truth. One evening, I told her I was heading out for a work trip, an overnight stay a few towns over. She barely reacted, just nodded and said, "Be safe." No questions, no concern, nothing. That's when I knew I was already gone in her mind. I didn't go on that trip. Instead, I waited. At 11:47 p.m., she left our house in a rush, barely looking back. My heart pounded as I followed her, keeping a safe distance. She drove straight to that high-rise, entered the building, and took the elevator up. I waited for over an hour, stomach churning, before I saw her again, this time, draped in a man's hoodie, hair messy, lips swollen from something I didn't want to think about. I didn't need to see anything else. The evidence was all there. I was just a placeholder, a safety net while she played house with someone else. I went home that night with a plan. By the time Rachel returned home the next morning, she was stepping into a ghost town. Our house? Empty. Our joint accounts? Cleared. My phone? Disconnected. Every trace of me vanished. I left her one thing, though. A single note on the kitchen counter. For words. You wanted freedom? Enjoy. And then, I disappeared. Rachel must have thought she had control over everything. She was playing her game so well, lying straight to my face, sneaking out while I slept, probably laughing at me behind my back with her new lover. But she never considered the possibility that I would be the one to flip the board. I imagined her reaction when she stepped into the house that morning. Maybe at first, she thought she was in the wrong place. That kind of eerie silence, the kind that doesn't belong in a home that was once filled with life, must have hit her immediately. No sound of the TV playing in the background, no faint smell of coffee brewing, no signs of me at all. Then she must have noticed the missing furniture, the empty closets, the absence of my shoes by the door. Panic must have started creeping in when she checked the bank app on her phone and saw a big, fat zero staring back at her. I had taken everything. Not just my things, but my presence. My very existence in that house had been wiped away, like I had never lived there at all. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about escape. I wasn't going to be the guy who begged and cried while his cheating wife gaslit him into thinking he was crazy. I wasn't going to sit through a fake apology, a ridiculous excuse, or some last-minute sob story about how she made a mistake. No, Rachel made her choice long before I did. I was just the first to act on it. That first week, I stayed completely off the grid. No calls, no texts, no social media. I booked a cheap rental house in a different state under a new name. The less she knew about where I was, the better. And from what I heard later, she freaked out. She tried calling my phone. Disconnected. She went to my work. I had already resigned. She reached out to my friends, asking if they had seen me. They all said the same thing. Haven't heard from him. That's when she turned up at my parents' house. Big mistake. My mom, who never really liked Rachel to begin with, slammed the door in her face the second she saw her. But not before throwing a brutal line over her shoulder. He's finally free. Leave him alone. I heard from an old coworker that Rachel even filed a missing persons report. The police, of course, didn't take it seriously. I was an adult. I had left voluntarily, and I hadn't broken any laws. As far as they were concerned, she was just another dumped wife looking for someone to blame. But she didn't stop there. No, Rachel wasn't used to being the one left behind. 2 weeks after I vanished, she did something I never expected. She showed up at my brother's place. And that's where things took a turn. Rachel was losing control, and I knew it. It wasn't just about me disappearing. It was the fact that I had taken all the power from her hands. She had been so certain of herself, so sure that I'd always be there, just another piece of furniture in her life, until I wasn't. And that kind of loss, that kind of shock, It was eating her alive. By the time she showed up at my brother's place, she was a mess. My brother, Nate, wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, especially when it came to Rachel. He had always been suspicious of her, even before I was. I guess sometimes the people on the outside can see the cracks before we do. When she knocked on his door, he didn't even let her step inside. "Where is he?" she demanded. Nate leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Why do you care?" Her breath was uneven. I could imagine her standing there, hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. I wasn't sure if she was losing sleep from guilt or panic, probably both. "He's my husband," she snapped. He just left. He emptied our accounts. He vanished." Nate let out a dry laugh. "You mean, after you cheated on him?" He tilted his head, mock curiosity in his voice. "I gotta say, Rachel, I thought you'd be happier. You got exactly what you wanted. A life without him. Isn't that what this was all about?" Her expression twisted into something desperate. "That's not," she started, but stopped herself. She wasn't used to being the one questioned. "You want to know where he is?" Nate continued, stepping forward just enough to make her shrink back. "I don't know. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But let me make one thing crystal clear. He doesn't want to be found. You lost him. You did that. Now go back to whatever guy you thought was better than him." And then, he shut the door in her face. I got the full play-by-play from Nate later when he called to check in. His words were simple but firm. "She's unraveling, man." I wasn't surprised. The thing about people like Rachel? They thrive on control. They need to be the ones making the decisions, the ones dictating how the story plays out. The moment you take that from them, they don't know what to do. And from the sound of it, she was spiraling fast. But here's the thing. Desperate people make reckless choices. And Rachel? She wasn't going to give up that easily. A week later, I got my first real clue about just how far she was willing to go. I was laying low, keeping a low profile in a quiet town where no one knew my name. I had rented a simple house, paid in cash, left no digital footprints. I was careful, so careful. And yet, when I walked into a local diner one morning, I felt it. That prickling sensation at the back of my neck. That gut instinct I had learned to trust. I turned, scanning the room, my heart slamming against my ribs. Then I saw her, sitting at a table in the corner, sipping coffee like she belonged there. Rachel. She had found me. And the look in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. Rachel shouldn't have been there. She had no reason to be in this town. No ties, no business. Yet, there she was, sitting at a booth in the corner of the diner, swirling her coffee with the same absent-minded expression she used to have on lazy Sunday mornings at home. Except now, her eyes weren't filled with warmth. They were locked onto me, sharp and calculating. My stomach clenched. How had she found me? I had been so careful. No credit cards, no phone calls to mutual friends, no social media breadcrumbs. There was no way she could have tracked me unless she had help. My blood ran cold at the thought. Had she hired someone? A private investigator? I forced myself to move, to act natural, walking toward the counter like I hadn't just spotted the woman who had torn my life apart. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled at me as she poured a fresh cup of coffee. "The usual?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "Thanks." Rachel didn't make a move. She just sat there, watching, waiting. I debated leaving right then and there, walking out, packing up my things, and disappearing all over again. But something in me snapped. No, not this time. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't the one who had done something wrong. So I turned. I walked straight toward her table and slid into the seat across from her. "How'd you find me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't sweet. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they think they've already won. "You always underestimate me, baby," she said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "Did you really think you could just disappear?" My fingers clenched into fists under the table. "I didn't think. I did." Her eyes darkened. "You emptied our accounts," she said, her voice dropping. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I went to buy groceries and my card was declined. I had to call my mother and beg her for money like some pathetic teenager." I shrugged. "Not my problem." She scoffed, setting her cup down with a little too much force. "It is your problem, because I'm not leaving without answers." She leaned forward. "What did you think was going to happen? That you'd just disappear into the night and I'd forget about you? That I'd move on?" "That's exactly what I thought," I said. considering you had no problem moving on before I left. Her face twisted, a flicker of something dangerous in her eyes. I never meant for things to get this messy. I laughed, shaking my head. Messy? You blew up our marriage. You lied to my face for months. You were the one sneaking around, Rachel. And now you're mad that I won't sit around and take it. She exhaled sharply, drumming her fingers against the table. I need to talk to you. Somewhere private. I smirked. Yeah, that's not happening. Her expression hardened. If you don't come with me, I'll start making a scene. I'll tell everyone here that you abandoned your wife, stole from me, left me with nothing. Do you really want that kind of attention? My jaw tightened. She was bluffing, at least. I hoped she was. But the last thing I needed was to draw attention to myself in a small town where everyone knew everyone. I exhaled, glancing around. The diner was half full, a few people casually watching us. Rachel wasn't stupid. She knew how to manipulate a situation in her favor. And if I walked out now, she'd only follow me. Fine. I'd play her game. For now. 10 minutes, I said, standing. That's all you get. She smiled like she had won something. That's all I need. I followed her out of the diner, my gut telling me that whatever she had planned, it wasn't going to be good. I should have walked away. I should have let her scream in that diner, let her make a fool of herself. But instead, I followed her outside, down the quiet street, where the only sound was the occasional passing car and the faint hum of an old streetlight flickering above us. The town was small, the kind of place where strangers stood out, and I had done everything to blend in. Until now. Rachel didn't speak as we walked. She led me around the corner to a parking lot behind an old bookstore, where her car was waiting. A sleek black sedan. Not hers. My chest tightened. Nice car, I said, keeping my tone casual. Didn't know you upgraded. She stopped by the driver's side, tapping her manicured nails against the roof. It's not mine. I already knew the answer before I asked, but I did anyway. Whose is it? She tilted her head, watching me like she was trying to figure out how much I already knew. His. I let out a slow breath. There it was. So, what? I asked. He's here too? Waiting to ambush me. Her lips curled into a small smile. No. He doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't even know I found you. That made me pause. If she wasn't here with him, if she wasn't backed by some smug, self-satisfied man who thought he had stolen my wife and gotten away with it, then why was she here? I leaned against the nearest car, arms crossed. All right, Rachel. You've got 10 minutes. Say whatever it is you came here to say. For the first time since I had sat down in that diner, I saw something flicker in her expression, something that almost looked like hesitation. I screwed up, she said, her voice quieter now. I know I did. But you didn't have to disappear like that. You didn't have to take everything. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, I absolutely did. She took a step closer. You don't understand it. No, you don't understand, I snapped. You don't get to stand here and act like you're the victim. You don't get to pretend you were just some innocent wife who made a tiny mistake. You didn't trip and fall into another man's bed, Rachel. You made a choice. Over and over again. She flinched. Good. I should hate you, I continued, voice steady. I should be furious. But you know what? I'm not. Because the second I walked out of that house, the second I left you standing there in the ruins of what you destroyed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I paused, letting the words sink in. Relief. She swallowed hard, her grip tightening on the car door. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed again, shaking my head. Yeah? Well, you did. And now you have to live with it. Silence stretched between us. I could see it, the war in her mind. The part of her that wanted to scream at me, to lash out, to twist the narrative until she came out looking like the wounded party. But there was another part too. The part that knew she had lost. Finally, she exhaled sharply and looked away. I thought you'd come back. I stared at her, unblinking. Then you never really knew me. She nodded once, like she was accepting something she didn't want to. Then, without another word, she turned, got into the car, and drove away. I stood there for a long time after she was gone. Maybe this was the end. Maybe she'd let it go. But deep down, I knew Rachel. And something told me, this wasn't over. That message, you should have stayed gone, sat on my phone screen, a reminder that Rachel wasn't done. But instead of panic, I felt something else. Clarity. She wanted me rattled, to make me second-guess myself, to think she had more control than she actually did. But I had been through too much to let her manipulate me again. Still, I wasn't about to ignore it. I packed my things, locked up the rental house, and left town before the sun had even fully risen. This time, I had a plan. No more running blindly. I needed answers. Instead of heading deeper into the unknown, I drove back to a place I hadn't been in years, my old hometown. Not the one I had shared with Rachel, but the one I had left behind long before I met her. The town where my brother, Nate, still lived. By the time I pulled into his driveway, he was already outside, leaning against his truck like he had been expecting me. "Took you long enough," he said with a smirk. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You knew I was coming?" "I had a feeling." He motioned for me to follow him inside. Nate had always been the kind of guy who could read between the lines. When Rachel showed up at his door weeks ago, desperate for information, he knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. But now, with me standing in front of him, he had his answer. "She's not letting this go, is she?" he asked as he poured us both a cup of coffee. I shook my head. "Not even close." He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "You ready to stop running?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had spent months looking over my shoulder, waiting for Rachel to show up, for the past to pull me back in. But I was tired. And Nate was right. If I wanted this to end, I had to stop running. I nodded. "Yeah, it's time." And just like that, we started putting together a plan. Rachel had spent months trying to track me down, making herself the victim, spinning a story where I was the villain who abandoned her. But the thing about lies? They eventually catch up to you. With Nate's help, I started making calls. Quiet ones. To people I had cut off when I disappeared. Friends. Old coworkers. Even a few acquaintances I never thought I'd need again. And the more I talked, the clearer the picture became. Rachel hadn't just been looking for me. She had been making mistakes. Big ones. I found out that her new relationship, the one she had thrown everything away for, was already falling apart. That the man she had risked everything for wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined. And worse, she was running out of money. Fast. It didn't take long before the cracks started showing. The same people she had once charmed were starting to see through her. The same friends who had once taken her side were beginning to question things. And when she finally tried to reach out to me again, this time, with a carefully crafted message about how she had made mistakes, I knew she was only doing it because she had nowhere else to turn. But I wasn't falling for it. I sent her one simple response. "I wish you the best. Please don't contact me again." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was just the truth. And for the first time since I had walked away, I felt like I was truly free. Months passed, and slowly, life started to feel normal again. I settled into a new place. This time, without the need to hide. I reconnected with people I had lost touch with. I started a new job, built a new routine. And most importantly, I stopped looking over my shoulder. Rachel tried reaching out a few more times. First, with long, apologetic messages. Then, with excuses. Finally, with silence. It was over. One day, Nate and I were sitting on his back porch, watching the sun set over the trees. He took a sip of his drink, then glanced at me. "So," he said, "what's next?" I thought about it for a moment. For the first time in a long time, I said, "I don't know, and I think I'm okay with that." He nodded. "Good. You deserve that." And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I truly believed it.